it's Jennifer from Fiberflux. Welcome to the 2021 Fiberflux Temperature Throw Crochet Along. I'm so excited to be sharing this project with you all today. I've had a lot of people asking when we're going to do our temperature project and what we're going to be doing, and I'm happy to announce it's going to be a throw. Now, a couple years ago, we did a temperature blanket that was similar with motifs, but I really wanted to kind of pare things down and simplify it this time around, and we're going to be doing a one round motif for each day of 2021. And then we're going to do one more round to join them. We're going to be using the join as you go technique, where we're going to be joining them as we make each one. And this is actually the first row of our project. So if you're not familiar with this concept of a temperature project, each day of the year we have a temperature range and a color designated to it. So for this day, for example, with this turquoise color, that day was between 31 degrees and 40 degrees. So we did designated turquoise to that. So that represented that day of the year, then, and so forth. Okay, so I have this chart here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the chart later, and the yarn used, and the colors used, and everything like that. But just to give you an idea of how this project works. Now, in the past, we've done other blankets. I've done a temperature scarf and a temperature shawl. So there are some other projects that I have. If you prefer to do one of those projects instead, you can still crochet along with us. And you can also choose different color palette ideas. I did some like rainbow bright colors. You could do some other things too, some more muted colors, if you will, or neons or something else. You can designate completely different colors to each temperature range. And if you live in a different region where the temperatures aren't as wide of a scale, like this goes from less than 0 degrees to 100 plus degrees, because I have cold and hot where I am. But if you have a shorter range of temperature, let's say the coldest it ever gets where you live is like 50 degrees and it only gets as hot as 90 degrees, you might want to, instead of doing these increments, you might want to make different increments and different ranges to suit where you live, where you personally live as well. So it's very flexible. You can change the colors, you can change the ranges, you can use different yarn if you prefer. And at the end of the year, you'll have this beautiful blanket that represents the entire year. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to make the one round motif of the color of the day. And I'm going to show you how to add the second round using the join as you go technique, so you can attach your motifs together as you make the blanket. You don't have to wait to the end of the year to sew them all together. We're going to learn how to make month markers, so you can see the beginning and the end of each month. We're going to talk about all the supplies that you need. We're going to talk a little bit more about our chart. We're also going to talk about organizing your motifs. So I use a blank calendar and make little notes, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. One more thing I want to mention before we get started is there is a Ravelry group and a Facebook group where we share, it's a CAL group, and we share our projects. There are other CALs that I do throughout the year as well, but you can share colors, you can show off your work, you can ask questions, and I'll put the links down below for those. And also, if you share your work on social media as you go through the year, be sure to use the hashtag FiberfluxCal to share your work. I hope that you do this project with me. It's a lot of fun. So let's get started. For this project, you're going to need some supplies, but also I have some handy tools here to show you how to kind of plan out your project as well. So we're going to be using a 6mm J crochet hook to be creating our squares and joining them together. You'll also need a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle to weave in any ends, and a tape measure or ruler if you're after a specific size or if you want to measure your squares as well. Now I made a chart. We are going to be using a lot of the same yarn we've used for other temperature projects that we've done in the past. I've done a shawl, a scarf, and a different blanket. This one's going to have a little bit of a different look and be a little bit smaller. But I'm going to be using Red Heart Super Saver for this because I have lots of it in a lot of these colors, And it's also easy to find and comes in a lot of different rainbow colors. Now, you don't have to choose a rainbow palette like I'm doing here. You could do a range of pastels. You could do some heathered shades. You could do neons, anything you like, really. Now, if you join me for the 2019 temperature blanket, we did a very similar palette, but with red instead of this hot pink, and our Join As You Go color was white. We're going to be doing black to frame all these squares in, which I've always wanted to do a blanket that way, so I'm really excited to do this. So let's talk a little bit about the colors. Again, we're going to be using Red Heart Super Saver. That's a easy to find acrylic yarn. If you can't find it though, just look for something of a similar weight. And if you hop on over to the Fiberflux blog, the link is below. I have some substitutions that you can use as well. So let's look at our chart. Now, all I did was I just typed the colors and the temperature ranges onto a piece of cardstock, and then I took my hole punch and just did a hole down each side and then just did a little swatch of yarn. You don't have to do that. You could take like a colored pencil and just kind of shade in the colors by your ranges, but it is nice to have a little chart here to use as you're making your squares. You can refer back to it. You can also hop on over to the blog at any time. There is a photo of this chart that you can peek at as well. And also feel free to mix things up. I've seen people do Join As You Go color in all kinds of different colors, and it looks really neat to see everyone's together at the end of the year. So again, for our Join As You Go color, I'm going to use black yarn. And these are the actual colors they're called when you look for them in the store. If it's less than 0 degrees to 10 degrees, I'm going to use Orchid, this light purple here. For 11 to 20 degrees, Amethyst, which is like a very bright kind of jewel tone purple. For 21 to 30 degrees, I'm going to use a color called Delft Blue. For 31 degrees to 40 degrees, there is a color called Turquoise. It's like a classic kind of turquoise color. For 41 to 50 degrees, I'm going to use a color called Minty. For 51 to 60 degrees, Spring Green. 61 to 70 degrees, Bright Yellow. 71 to 80 degrees, Pumpkin. 81 to 90 degrees, Perfect Pink. And 91 to 100 degrees plus, I'm going to use the Grenadine colorway for that. So here is our range of colors. Now, once you've made your chart and you've kind of selected your palette, we're going to talk about the calendar next. I like to print a blank year-long calendar. If you hop on over to the blog, I have a link. You can kind of check out their calendars. You might like a different way of planning. You might want to use some graph paper or something like that. But I have the whole year here, and it printed in grayscale, so if it's hard to see, I apologize. But it shows each day of the entire year. The months are in columns. Again, if you can't find this or don't really like this format, you could make your own in Excel as well. But I have all the months as columns, and then the days of the month are here in rows, okay? So what I do is I have a couple days filled in so I could show you, but again, on the blog, I have a link to historic weather data. So if you miss a couple days or if you get behind a month or two, you can go back and look at the historic weather data and kind of fill those in. So what I do for each one of these blocks is I go in and fill in the temperature. The average daily is what we're going to be doing. Now I know for our past blanket, we did the average, we did the high and the low. We made a 2-round square and then did the Join As You Go as the 3rd round. But for this, we're going to do a 1-round square per day, and then we're going to use the black to join all of them together, okay? So what I did was I did the average daily temperature. Now, some sites will give you the average temperature. Some, you have to take the high and the low, you add them together, and then divide by 2, and that will give you the average if you don't have that available, so you can figure it out. And then, so I went through and I filled in a bunch up until today. And then I went to the forecast. You can also look ahead at the forecast if you like. Some people don't like to do that. They like to actually experience the day first before adding it to your calendar. So it's really total preference, however you like to do this. Some people like to wait till the end of the month and kind of tackle the whole month at once. And these are little teeny tiny motifs that only take a few seconds per motif. So you could really do like a chunk of days in one sitting, totally for sure. So after I pick, or after I look up the temperature, then I'll go back to my chart and I'll say, okay, this January 1st, the average daily was 35 degrees. So I go to my chart and that is the turquoise. So as you can see, I put a little tiny T next to that temperature. So then what I do is go in, fill in everything, and then as I make each motif, not join it or anything, but as I make each motif, what I'll do is I'll take my highlighter and I'll go through and I'll just mark it off. So that way I know that that motif is done. Now what you could do also is take your pen, after you fill these in, after you've marked it off that the motif is finished, then what you could also do once it is on your blanket, once it has been attached to your blanket, you could go off and cross out the day or check the day off as you go, okay? You just got to kind of find what works for you. I like to jot things down as I do them and mark things off because you may not be able to work on this for a week, and when you come back, you don't want to have to like count all this stuff that you've made or count the rows and anything like that. So just a little helpful hint, writing it down is super helpful because every time you sit down, you don't want to have to like figure it all out again. It really does save you a lot of time and aggravation. The last thing I want to talk to you about before we learn how to make these little motifs and join them together is the blanket itself. How wide is this going to be? How tall is this going to be? We're doing lots of little squares. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of follow the same format of the blanket we did in 2019. So if you made that blanket with us, you'll kind of be familiar with this. But the number of days in the year is 365. This 2021 is not a leap year, so we took that into consideration too. So the formula that I use, because it's not a super easy number to divide, and sometimes when you do try to divide 365 or even 377 if you want like the month markers, which a lot of you like to do, including myself, it doesn't divide right. I mean, you can divide it, but it makes a really narrow and very tall blanket, and we want more of like not a square, but not like a super narrow rectangle. So the formula that I use that I like that works for me, and again, this is a pretty flexible project. You can kind of change the dimensions, as you like. But we're going to make our blanket 18 squares wide and 21 squares tall. So there'll be 18 across and 21 down. So how that works though is that if you multiply 18 by 21, that's 378. That's more days than there are in the year, because remember we have 365 days in the year. But I wanted to make a nice shaped rectangle of an even number. I wouldn't have to like leave a square off or divide something or get messy like that. So that 378 squares, that number comes from 365 days a year plus 12 months that I make a blank black square to indicate the beginning of a month. So as we go through, that plain black square indicates, so you can see January, you can see February, as you look at your blanket. But that still leaves us with one extra square, because 378 gives you that nice clean 18 by 21. You don't have to divide anything. So you are left with an extra square that you have to figure out. So what I do is take your favorite color or a color that's kind of matching with the temperatures. And then what you can do is a special day to you, or your birthday, or your child's birthday, or an anniversary, or it's just some kind of special day, plug it into that spot on your blanket. And that gives you this nice 18 by 21, 18 across, 21 down, and it's nice and neat. So you do have to fiddle with it a little bit. If you want to fiddle with it in a different way, feel free. That's kind of the way I like to break it down. Okay. So now that we've gotten all the planning out of the way, again, a highlighter and a pen is super helpful. You can print out blank calendars. I just made this little chart to kind of keep as a reference throughout the year, which I do each time I do one of these. Once you've gotten all your supplies together, what you want to do is make your little squares. So I have on my calendar here, the January 1st was a Turquoise day. So I have some of my Turquoise yarn over here, and I've made the square. It's right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my highlighter and I'm going to go ahead and just mark it off. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the next color. The January 2nd was a minty day. So if you look here, it was a minty day. So I'm going to grab my minty yarn. And we're going to make our first little motif. They're super easy and very quick, okay? So let me kind of clear all this out of the way, and we're going to zoom in and make our first motif. Okay, what we're going to do first is put a slip knot on our hook. Wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop. Bring the yarn behind the loop, reach in with your hook, bring up that loop and tighten. We're going to make a ring. I'm going to grab this other square so we can look. We're going to make a ring that we're going to work all the stitches into. So what we want to do next is make our starting chain that we'll create a ring out of. So we need to do that by chaining 4. To make a chain, wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the loop. That's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we're going to make our ring by going to that first chain that we made, the chain farthest from the hook, and we're going to join with a slip stitch. Insert the hook into that farthest chain, bring up a loop, then bring that loop through the loop already on your hook, and then open up that ring, and we're also going to hold this tail along the edge as we work. Now I want to make an important note about tails. We're going to have, like I said, 378 little motifs, so as much as you possibly can, try to weave in those ends. It'll really help you out in the end, okay? Also, if you prefer to do the magic ring to start your motifs, you can hop on over to the blog, and I'll put that link on the blog for that if you prefer to start them that way. But we're going to do some chains for these. So we're going to hold this tail along the edge as we work. That will weave that center tail in. And then when we go to do the join as you go with the black yarn, we're going to weave this outer tail in at that time. Okay, so we're going to try to weave in the tails as much as we can all along the way. All right, so then what we want to do is chain 3. 1, 2, 3, that counts as our first double crochet. Then we're going to make 2 double crochets into the center of the ring, wrap the yarn around the hook, insert the hook into the center of the ring, bring up a loop, wrap yarn around the hook, bring through the first 2 loops, wrap yarn around the hook, bring it through the next 2 loops. Then we're going to make our second double crochet. Then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work 3 double crochets into the center of the ring. So 1, 2, and 3, and then we're going to chain 1. These chain 1s in between are going to create our corner spaces, okay? Then we're going to put 3 double crochets in the center of the ring. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1. And then we're going to do that one more time. 3 double crochet, chain 1. So 1, 2, and 3, chain 1. Then finally, we're going to join to close the round with a slip stitch. So count 3 chains up. 1, 2, 3. Insert the hook into that third chain up. Might have to wiggle it a little bit if it's snug. Bring up a loop. Now bring that loop through the loop already on your hook, like that. And then what we're going to do is grab our scissors, cut the yarn, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit because we're going to start putting these together. And then we're going to fasten off. So wrap the yarn around the hook and just bring it through the loop to finish. Okay, so now we have 2 squares, and now we can join them together, okay? So the join as you go technique is going to be really helpful because we have a lot of motifs here. So what we want to do first, before I like to join them, I like to try to take care of the ends as much as possible. So flip your squares over to the back, take your scissors and give them a trim. Grab your next square, and give it a little trim. Then we're going to get our join as you go yarn, whatever color you're using. And I would love to hear what color you're using for your join as you go part of your blanket. Okay, so we have our squares prepped. Now if we go back to our calendar, because I just did the minty square, I'm going to go ahead and mark that off just because to keep me straight here. Now, as something totally optional, I did grab a stitch marker because I like to put a stitch marker on the very first square. So if I put the project down and I pick it back up, I'll immediately know what the very top left corner of my blanket is because of that first square, okay? So that being said, if you remember before, we talked about to give you that nice even 378 number, there's going to be our 365 plus our 12-month marker. So at the beginning of every month, we're going to do kind of like a blank marker square. You don't have to do this. It's totally up to you. But I like to do that because I like to see at a glance where the months start and stop instead of like a flow of colors. Sometimes it's fun to see that. But for this big blanket with motifs, I do like to see like a stop and a start. So we're going to add 12 months onto that. I'm going to do my marker, my month markers in the same color as my join as you go. So it'll be like a blank square, okay? And then the special day will be another color I'll decide on later. But I went ahead and also made a blank square because that's the beginning of the month. Now, what you can do too to keep yourself straight is at the first day of the month, you might want to take a contrasting color. I took this bright orange and put a marker on here. So just mark off the first day of the year like this so that you know to also put a month marker in there. Again, this part is totally up to you, but I think it will be neat to see the changeover of the months visually on your blanket. So we're ready to do the join as you go. So if we go in order with our month marker, our first temperature, which was the turquoise, and our second temperature, which was the minty, this is going to be our first little line up here, okay? I'm going to do rose and have mine sort of snake around, okay? I'm going to go around like this, okay? So that it's a continuous stream of, it'll still be in order, okay? So grab your hook, and what we're going to do is we're going to put round 2 on the first square, okay? So grab your first square, and this is pretty easy. It's very similar to what we just did. What you're going to do, and let me zoom in a little bit so you can see, is put your hook into that first corner space. Remember those chain ones? Those are our corner spaces. And we're going to tie the new join as you go yarn on, okay? And I apologize, there's not a lot of contrast for you to see. When there's 2 different colors, you can see a little bit easier. But we're going to just tie that onto any corner space. And then hold that tail along the edge. We're going to do that as much as possible. Again, this can be any corner space that you tie the yarn onto. Put your hook back in that corner space, bring up a loop, chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to work 2 double crochet, 1, whoops, and 2. And in that same corner space, we need to create a new kind of corner. So chain 1 and then put 3 more double crochets in that corner space. 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to hop over to the next corner space that we see. Now we have a corner space, but we also have a tail. So try and incorporate that tail in there as much as possible. And we're going to do the next corner. So that's going to be 3 double crochet, 1, 2, 3, chain 1, and 3 more, whoops, hold that tail, 3 more double crochet on the same space. 1, 2, 3, okay? Then we're going to chain 1, still holding that tail, go into the next corner space. 3 double crochet, 1, 2, 3, chain 1, hold that tail, and 3 double crochet in that same corner space. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, continue around to the next corner space, and 1, 2, 3, chain 1, and 3 double crochet in that same space. 1, 2, 3, chain 1, and then what we're going to do is count that third chain up. 1, 2, 3, and join with a slip stitch in that third chain up to close the round. So you noticed I did the first square in its entirety. I didn't join anything yet. So you're going to do the first square completely without joining anything. And then what we can do is cut the yarn and fasten off, okay? You don't start joining until the second square. Okay, so just hang on with that tail for a minute. And what we're going to do is all these tails that we wove in as we went along, take the time now to give them a little trim, okay? And it'll get them all out of your way, and you won't have to worry about them, okay? If you have any yarn crumbs, sweep them away. Okay, so this is our first full square. So next we're going to go back to our calendar, and our second color is turquoise. So grab your turquoise, or whatever color you've chosen. But before you start joining, let's grab our stitch marker. And I am going to pop that on because I want to remember which one the first one is, okay? Now, I wouldn't worry too much about these outside tails because later on at the end of the year, I'm going to show you how to put a nice rainbow border on this so that you can kind of frame it all in. It's totally up to you. You could just weave the ends in and continue, but if you want to do a border, you can do that as well. Okay, so what we're going to do with our next square is put our hook in any of those corner spaces and bring the new yarn through. Okay, and just tie it right on there. Just like that, into any of those corner spaces. As a side note, I like to put it, tie it into a space opposite of the next tail I'm going to have to weave in, just because it kind of lessens the bulk of having to weave in as you go. Okay, so reinsert the hook back into that corner space, bring up a loop, and chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And I don't like to do my joins right away. I like to get one of the sides going first, okay, and then join in that next corner. Okay, so work 2 double crochets in that corner space, 1 and 2, and then we're going to chain 1 and then 3 more double crochet in that space. So 1, 2, and 3, okay? Then chain 1, and then we're going to hop over to the first full corner. This was where we began. So this is where we're going to join, okay? So what you're going to do is work half of that corner, okay? So in that corner space, work 3 double crochet, 1, 2, 3, and instead of doing your chain 1 here, we're going to do a join. So grab your square, and we're going to line up our corner. So find one of the corners of your first square, and we're going to do the corner in there. So what you're going to do is go in from the top with your hook, and you're going to reach back, and you're going to scoop that yarn and pull it through, and then you're going to pull that loop through the loop that's already on your hook, and that is a slip stitch join, okay? Then you're going to finish off your corner, rather, and work 3 double crochets into that corner space to finish that corner up. So 1, 2, and 3. My stitch marker is making a lot of noise here. And our corner is joined, okay? Now instead of doing a chain 1 here, we're going to do a join. So go into that side space. See how we have a space in between our corners? Go in from the top, reach back, scoop up that yarn, bring that loop through the loop already on your hook, and then we're going to hop over to the next corner, and we are at a tail, so just remember to keep that tail incorporated. And we're going to work 3 double crochet to get that corner started, okay? So 1, 2, and 3. Okay? And now instead of working a chain 1, we need to do a join. Okay? So go into that corner space of our other square, reach back, scoop up that yarn, bring that loop through the loop already on your hook. And then we're going to work 3 double crochet. 1, holding that tail along the edge, 2, and 3. Okay? So we are fully joined. Our squares are fully joined here. So we're just going to finish up our square the way we normally would. Okay? So chain 1, because we're not doing a join this time. And we're going to go into that next corner space and work 3 double crochet. 1, 2. I'm trying to hold this so this stitch marker isn't dragging along the table. And 3. Chain 1, and then 3 more double crochet into that same corner space. 1, 2, 3. Chain 1, and then we're going to join with a slip stitch. So count 3 chains up and join with a slip stitch to close the round. Okay? So we're going to cut the yarn and fasten off. Okay, so the next part of the blanket that I wanted to show you is the beginning of the next row. So just to recap, we put a stitch marker at the very first square, which is also the month marker, and I worked all the way across. Now remember, our width is going to be 18 squares across and 21 squares down. So I went ahead and I used the extended forecast to kind of help me out a little bit, but I went 18 across. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. So now we're ready to come down and do the next row, okay? So I wanted to show you that. Now I mentioned before that I was going to sort of be working in like a zigzag kind of snake pattern. So if you wanted to do that, you can, or you can come down and begin a new row, kind of like when you're reading a book or something like that. So figure out how you want your rows to be configured, and then we're going to come down here because I'm going to make mine just wrap around. And what I'm going to do is we're going to add the next square, which I've already made 2 because I wanted to show you how to join 1 square onto 2 squares, and then I want to show you how to join 1 square onto 3 squares. So we're going to do that too. And it's very, very similar, but we're going to go, instead of going into the corner spaces, we're going to go in between the squares. I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so I went ahead and started the square, working the first corner the same way we've been doing for all of our squares. Now, we're coming into the next row here, so I am going to join in the corner space like we've been doing. So that part will not change. So when we go to do our next corner, we're going to start it with our 3 double crochets. Same thing we've been doing. So 1, 2, and 3. And then instead of doing that chain 1, I'm going to grab my square and we're going to go in from the top, reach back, scoop up the yarn, join with a slip stitch, and then make your 3 double crochets in that same corner space. So 1, 2, and 3. Okay, now we're ready to join in between the 2 squares here. So we're going to hop over to that next corner space and we're going to work 3 double crochet. 1, 2, 3. And now we're ready to join. So what you want to do, instead of going into these corner spaces like we've been doing, there's one here and there's one here. If you went into either one of those, it would put you kind of off center. You want to keep everything nice and lined up. So instead of doing the corner spaces, when you're joining 1 onto 2, we're going to go in between. So if you pull your squares apart a little bit, you'll see that there's an opening, okay? So we had a join down here at the corner, and then there's going to be an opening right here. That's where we're going to do our join. So go in from the top, in between those two squares in that opening, reach back, scoop up the yarn, slip stitch it, and then you can finish your corner. And the rest of your square is normal. Okay, so work your 3 double crochets, 1, 2, 3, and now we're joined on and everything is lined up properly. Now you can just finish off the rest of your square. Okay, we have our next square and I've started it the same way, and we're gonna go ahead and join this one too so I can show you how to join 1 onto 3. Okay, so we're gonna start at our join in this corner here. I did my my chain 3 and my 2 double crochets to start the corner, and then I'm going to do my slip stitch join. This is just the same thing we've been doing on this type of join. And I'm going to do 3 double crochet, 1, 2, 3. All right, let's start the next corner. So go to that next corner space and work 3 double crochet, 1, 2, 3, and now we're ready to join into this little nook here, okay? So you can do this 2 different ways. It's really a matter of preference. If you're not sure, try both and see which one you like best. You could go ahead and join. So if we went into these corner spaces here on this square and this square, it would be off center. If we go straight across into this corner space of the square directly across, it would not be off center, it would be nice and lined up. But if you don't want to hop over this big join here in the middle, you could go into, if you pull this open, you can see there's like a loop at the bottom. You can join there as well. I like to join into the corner space directly across just because it's a little bit more in between. This is just one single piece of yarn. It might be a little bit less sturdy. But if you don't want to hop over all that yarn, you can do it that way. So we're going to go straight across into that corner space this time. Go in from the top, reach back, scoop up the yarn, bring up that loop, and then bring that loop through the loop that's already on your hook. And then you can come back around here. I have a tail, so I'm going to hold that along the edge as I work. And we're going to complete the corner with our 3 double crochets. So 1, 2, and 3. And then you can continue around, go to your, I'm going to straighten that up a little bit. You don't want to see any color. See how that color's peeking through? You need to kind of slide things over so that doesn't happen. Now go over to your next corner. I'm still going to hold that tail. So let me grab that. And we're going to work 3 double crochets once again. 1, 2, 3. And we have another join here because we need to join here. And remember, when you join 1 into 2, we're going to go in between the squares this time. So go in between those squares, that little gap there, make your join, and then just finish your square as you normally would. Do your 3 double crochets and continue around to finish your square. So 1, 2, and 3. And we've already seen how to finish the square, so I'm just going to leave it at that. So we've learned how to do all different kinds of joins for our blanket, and it's starting to shape up. We now have a second row, which is very exciting. Just some tips before we depart. What I like to do is, let me grab my chart. I have this plastic, let me zoom out so you can see better. I have this plastic sleeve that I keep in my basket for my temperature project. So in my basket I have all the colors. I have my calendar, I have my little chart here, and I have the blanket itself and the tools that I need. So when I need to add to my blanket throughout the year, I can just grab everything. I don't have to collect everything every single time I want to work on it. Also, I wanted to show you on my calendar, I did a little line. The first 18 squares, you can see that's 17, but because we had our beginning of the month marker, it equates to 18 squares. So I did do a line so I could know when to stop and begin a new row. That might help you as well. Also, when I complete a month, I like to stop and weave all the ends in that I have so far. As you can see, with little motifs, you'll have a lot of motifs, so you'll have a lot of ends. It's just one of those things. So at the end of January, when I complete January, I'm going to go through, and a lot of these ends I wove as I went along. I can just go ahead and give them a little snip, and that's it. That's all I have to do. So I'd like to go through and snip everything, and there will be a few that you can, like this one on the end, we weren't able to weave that in as we went along, so you might want to grab your tapestry needle and weave a few of those in. If you want to, you could save it till the end of the year, but that might take you a long time. So I like to just kind of, at the conclusion of each month, just go through and weave in the ends. So I hope that you can join me for this crochet along. It's really fun, and this is such a beautiful look. We have all these little pops of color here. And I would love to hear about all the color choices that you're making for this. Are you going with bright rainbows like me? Are you doing pastel? What is your join as you go color? What will you be choosing this year? So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I will be providing updates each season. I'll share my blanket and my progress so far, and I hope that you'll do the same as well. Also, be sure and join our Ravelry group and our Facebook group. They're both CAL groups, and you can connect with other makers and share what you're doing. The links to that are below as well. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest FiberFlux video updates. Thanks again.